Michael Chen was having one of those mornings where everything felt just slightly off. His coffee had gone cold before he finished it. He'd misplaced his car keys twice, and now here he was on the Boulder Creek Trail, bent over like an old man because his shoelace had come undone for the third time. He was only 45, but some days his knees reminded him that he wasn't 20 anymore. The morning sun was just starting to break through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the dirt path. Michael had been coming to this trail for years, usually on Saturday mornings when the construction sites were quiet and he could clear his head. There was something about the sound of the creek rushing over rocks that made all his worries feel smaller. As he crouched down to tie his lace properly this time, something caught his eye. Just off to the side of the trail, half buried in the dirt and covered with dried leaves, something was reflecting the sunlight. At first he thought it might be a piece of broken glass or maybe a bottle cap, but when he reached over and brushed away the leaves, his fingers touched metal. It was a ring. A gold ring covered in dirt and tarnished from who knows how long it had been lying there. Michael picked it up carefully, turning it over in his palm. It was heavier than he expected, solid gold by the feel of it. Not some cheap costume jewelry that someone wouldn't miss. This was the real deal. He stood up slowly, his shoelace forgotten again, and walked over to a flat rock where the sunlight was brighter. He rubbed the ring against his shirt sleeve, trying to clean off some of the grime. That's when he saw it. There was writing inside the band. Squinting in the morning light, he could just make out the inscription, E+J Forever, June 1985. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. This wasn't just any ring. This was someone's wedding band. Someone had stood at an altar 10 years ago, slipped this ring on their finger and promised forever, and now it was lost, buried in the dirt on a hiking trail. He looked around the empty trail as if the owner might suddenly appear. But there was no one. Just him, the birds singing in the trees and the distant sound of the creek. He wondered how long the ring had been there. Days, weeks, months? There was no way to know. Michael slipped the ring into his jacket pocket and finally tied his shoelace. But the walk that morning was different. He couldn't stop thinking about the ring, about E and J. Were they still together? Had they searched frantically for this ring? He imagined someone retracing their steps along this very trail, looking down at the ground with desperate hope, maybe even with tears in their eyes. When he got back to his truck in the parking lot, Michael sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, the ring now resting in his palm. The gold had a warmth to it even through all the tarnish. He could see where it had been worn smooth on the inside from years of daily wear. This ring had meant something. It still meant something. The practical part of his brain told him to turn it in to the ranger station or maybe the local police. That's what people did with lost things, right? But something stopped him. He'd dealt with lost and found before. He knew how these things worked. The ring would sit in a box somewhere, gathering dust. After 90 days or whatever the required time was, it would probably be auctioned off or melted down. No, Michael thought. This ring needed to get back to its owner. The right way. The personal way. He drove home that morning with the ring safely in his pocket, already making plans in his head. He'd call the local newspaper, maybe take out an ad. He'd post notices at the trailhead. Someone had to be looking for this. Someone had to care. At home, his wife Linda was in the kitchen making pancakes. Their two kids, Danny and Lily, were still in their pajamas watching cartoons in the living room. It was a normal Saturday morning, the kind that Michael usually treasured. But today he was distracted. "You're back early," Linda said, flipping a pancake. "I thought you'd be gone at least another hour." "Found something interesting," Michael said, pulling the ring from his pocket. He showed it to her, pointing out the inscription. Linda wiped her hands on a dish towel and took the ring, holding it up to the light. "Oh wow, this is real gold. Someone's really missing this." "I'm going to find them," Michael said. "The owner. I'm going to get this back to them." Linda smiled at him. That knowing smile she got when he was being his stubborn, idealistic self. "You and your projects," she said. But there was affection in her voice. "How are you planning to do that?" "I'll figure it out," Michael said, taking the ring back. "I'll put up flyers, call the paper, maybe even go back to the trail and ask around." He meant every word. In that moment, standing in his kitchen with the smell of pancakes in the air and his kids laughing in the next room, Michael Chen made a promise to two people he'd never met. He would find E and J. He would return their ring. It felt important in a way he couldn't quite explain. That afternoon, after the pancakes were eaten and the dishes were washed, Michael found a small wooden box in his garage. It was made of cedar, with a brass clasp, something his grandfather had given him years ago. He placed the ring inside, cushioned on a piece of soft cloth. Then he put the box on a shelf in his bedroom closet, somewhere safe. "I'll find you," he said quietly, though there was no one to hear. "I promise." He had no idea that promise would take 30 years to keep. He had no idea that life was about to get complicated in ways he couldn't predict. He had no idea that the ring in the cedar box would move with him through 2 different homes, a marriage that would end, and children who would grow up and move away. All he knew was that on that Saturday morning in 1995, on a hiking trail near Boulder Creek, he had found something precious, and he was going to make it right. The ring stayed in the cedar box, waiting. E and J, whoever they were, had no idea that their lost treasure was safe. That somewhere in Colorado, a contractor with a soft heart and a stubborn streak was keeping a promise. That forever, inscribed in gold, meant something to a stranger. Michael went back to the trail the next weekend with a stack of flyers he'd printed at Kinko's. Found, gold wedding band on Boulder Creek Trail. If this is yours, please call to describe inscription. He stapled them to bulletin boards and telephone poles. He called the local newspaper and placed an ad in the classifieds. He even asked at the ranger station if anyone had reported a lost ring, but nobody called. The weeks turned into months. The ring stayed in the cedar box, and slowly life moved forward. Michael didn't forget about E and J, but the urgency faded. Other things demanded his attention. Work, family, bills, the everyday rhythm of living. Still, every now and then, he'd open that cedar box. He'd take out the ring, turn it over in his fingers, read that inscription one more time, and he'd think about the promise he'd made. Someday, he told himself. Someday he'd find them. Time has a funny way of moving. Sometimes it crawls, like when you're waiting for important news or sitting in a doctor's office. Other times it flies by so fast you barely notice it's gone. For Michael Chen, the years after finding the ring were the fast kind. The kind where you blink and suddenly a decade has passed. The ring stayed in the cedar box. The cedar box stayed on the shelf, and life kept happening. In 1997, Michael's construction company landed the biggest contract he'd ever seen, a new shopping center on the east side of Boulder. It meant long hours, early mornings, late nights. It meant coming home exhausted, barely able to stay awake through dinner. Linda would tell him about the kids' day at school, and he'd nod along, his mind still back at the job site thinking about permits and schedules and whether the concrete pour would happen on time. The money was good, though. Better than good. For the first time in their marriage, they weren't worried about bills. They could afford things, real things. A new car, a bigger house. That's how Michael found himself packing up boxes in 1999, moving his family from their small 3-bedroom ranch to a larger place with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for the kids to really play. Danny was 12 now, Lily was 9, and they were excited about having their own bigger rooms. Michael packed his closet last. When he reached for the cedar box on the top shelf, he paused. He'd almost forgotten it was there. Almost, but not quite. He opened it, and there was the ring exactly as he'd left it. The gold had tarnished a bit more, the inscription harder to read. "Still haven't found them, have you?" Linda said from the doorway. She was holding a box of winter clothes, hair tied back, looking tired from the day of packing. "No," Michael admitted. "I tried back when I found it. Nobody ever called. Maybe you should just let it go," she suggested gently. "Donate it or something. It's been 4 years." But Michael couldn't. He closed the box and packed it carefully in a larger box labeled Michael's personal items. The ring would come with them to the new house. He wasn't ready to give up on E and J yet. The new house brought new routines. Michael's business kept growing. He hired more workers, took on bigger projects. He was successful by any measure. But success came with a price. He was home less.
Present less.
There, but not really there. Linda started saying things like, "You're always working and the kids barely see you." Michael would promise to do better, to be around more. And he meant it. But then another project would come up, another opportunity, and he'd be gone again. In 2003, Danny graduated from high school. Michael made it to the ceremony, but had to leave early for a meeting. He saw the disappointment in his son's eyes, but told himself it was necessary. That he was building something, that it was all for the family. That same year, Linda asked for a divorce. Michael was blindsided. He'd known things weren't perfect, but divorce? They'd been married for 20 years. They had a history, a life together. But Linda was calm when she told him. She said she'd been unhappy for a long time, that she felt alone even when he was in the same room, that she wanted more than this. The divorce was finalized in 2004. It was civil, friendly even. They split everything fairly. Linda kept the house. Michael moved into a smaller place, a condo near the mountains. He didn't need much space anyway. It was just him now. When he unpacked his boxes in the new condo, he found the cedar box again. This time when he opened it, the ring felt heavier somehow. He thought about E and J, about their forever inscription. Had they made it? Were they still together? Or had their forever ended too, packed away in different boxes, living in different places? Michael was 54 years old now, and his life looked nothing like he'd imagined it would back in 1995. But he still couldn't let go of the ring. The years continued their march. Danny went to college, got married, had a kid. Michael became a grandfather at 56. Lily finished art school and moved to Oregon to teach. The visits became less frequent. Holidays, maybe. A week in summer if he was lucky. Michael threw himself into work even more. It was easier than sitting alone in his condo thinking about everything he'd lost. The business did well. He hired a project manager, then two. He could have retired early if he'd wanted to. But what would he retire to? An empty condo and too much time to think? In 2012, his mother passed away. Michael flew back to California for the funeral, stood at her graveside with his brother and sister, and felt the weight of time pressing down on him. His father had died 5 years earlier. Now both parents were gone. He was next in line, he realized. The older generation now. Going through his mother's things, he found boxes of old photos, pictures of himself as a kid, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. His parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful. Time really did move fast. Too fast, he kept thinking about the ring. About E and J, about promises made and whether they were kept. Back in his condo, Michael started a new habit. Every few months, he'd take out the cedar box. He'd hold the ring, read the inscription, and think about trying again to find the owners. He'd even open his laptop sometimes, type, "How to find someone from 1985" into Google. But the search results were overwhelming. Ancestry websites, private investigators, social media platforms he didn't understand. It all seemed too complicated, so the ring stayed in the box. The box stayed on the shelf, and Michael got older. By 2020, Michael was 70 years old. The pandemic hit and suddenly the world stopped. Construction sites shut down. Everyone stayed home. Michael found himself alone in his condo for months with nothing but time. He started going through his things. Really going through them. Sorting, organizing, throwing away stuff he'd been holding on to for no good reason. Old tax returns, broken tools, clothes that didn't fit anymore. That's when he found the cedar box again. How many times had he moved it now? 3 houses, 4 or 5? The box had followed him through his entire adult life. Michael sat on his bed and opened it slowly. The ring was still there, more tarnished than ever. The inscription was barely visible now, but he could still make it out if he held it up to the light. E+J forever, June 1985. 25 years. He'd had this ring for 25 years. A wave of sadness hit him. Not just about the ring, but about everything. All the time that had passed. All the promises he'd made to himself and others that he hadn't kept. He'd promised Linda he'd be there more, and he wasn't. He'd promised his kids he'd make time for them, and he didn't. He'd promised himself he'd find the owners of this ring, and he'd failed. Michael put the ring back in the box and closed it. Maybe Linda had been right all those years ago. Maybe it was time to let it go, to accept that some promises couldn't be kept, but he didn't throw it away. Couldn't throw it away. Instead, he put the box back on the shelf, next to his grandfather's old pocket watch and a small clay bowl Lily had made in 3rd grade. Things that mattered, things that meant something. The world eventually opened back up. Life tried to return to normal, whatever normal meant anymore. Michael was 73 now, still working but talking about retirement. Really talking about it this time. Danny called one Sunday and asked when he was finally going to slow down. "You've been saying you'll retire for 10 years, Dad," he said. "What are you waiting for?" Michael didn't have a good answer. What was he waiting for? Maybe he was scared of what retirement meant. All that empty time. All those hours with nothing to do but think about the past. But Danny had a point. How much longer was he going to keep pushing? How many more years did he have where he could actually enjoy life, travel, do the things he'd always said he'd do someday? That night, Michael made a decision. He'd retire at 75. Give himself 2 more years to wrap things up, train his replacement, make sure the business was in good hands. Then he'd step away. Finally. 2 years felt like both forever and no time at all. But Michael started planning. What would he do with all that time? Where would he go? What would his days look like? He thought about the ring again. Maybe, just maybe, when he retired and had time, he could finally try to find E and J. Really try this time. Not just a half-hearted attempt, but a real search. He'd have time. He'd have energy. He could make good on that promise he'd made 30 years ago. It was a nice thought. A hopeful thought. Something to look forward to. The cedar box stayed on the shelf, waiting. E and J, wherever they were, had no idea that someone still cared. That their ring was safe. That a stranger was still holding on to their forever. The day Michael Chen retired felt both monumental and strangely ordinary. There was a small party at the office. Cake from the grocery store, handshakes and hugs from people he'd worked with for decades. Then he walked out to his truck for the last time as an owner, and that was it. 40 years of building, managing, stressing, and succeeding over just like that. He was 75 years old. Retirement age, people said. Time to relax, they told him. Enjoy life. Travel. But as Michael drove home that evening, he felt something unexpected. Not relief or joy, but a strange kind of emptiness. What now? The first week was fine. He slept in late, read the newspaper cover to cover, watched shows he'd recorded but never had time for. He fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom, organized his garage, even tried a new recipe for dinner. But by the second week, he was getting restless. His condo felt too small, too quiet. The walls seemed to close in on him. He'd spent his entire adult life being busy, having somewhere to be, something to do. Now he had nothing but time, and it was suffocating. Danny called on Thursday evening. "How's retirement treating you, Dad?" "Fine," Michael lied. "Real good, relaxing." "You sound bored." Michael laughed despite himself. "Is it that obvious?" "You need a project," Danny said. "Something to focus on. You've never been good at sitting still." After they hung up, Michael thought about that. A project. Something to focus on. His mind wandered to the cedar box on the shelf. The ring. E and J. The promise he'd made 30 years ago. Maybe it was time. The next morning, Michael pulled the box down and opened it. The ring looked sad, he thought. Tarnished and neglected, but still solid. Still real. He decided his first project would be cleaning it. Getting it back to something close to how it looked when E first slipped it on Jay's finger all those years ago. He drove to a jewelry store downtown and showed the ring to the woman behind the counter. She was young, probably in her 30s, with kind eyes. "Can you clean this?" he asked. "Make it shine again?" She took the ring carefully, examining it under a special light. "This is beautiful, real gold. The inscription is lovely." She looked up at him. "Your wedding ring?" "No," Michael said. "I found it. Long time ago. I'm trying to find the owner." Her expression softened. "That's really sweet." "Yes, I can clean it. Polish it up nice. Give me about 20 minutes?" While he waited, Michael walked around the small downtown area. Boulder had changed so much since he'd first moved here. New buildings, new shops, new people. Time kept moving, kept changing everything. When he picked up the ring, he barely recognized it. The gold gleamed like it was brand new. The inscription was clear again, easy to read. E plus J forever, June 1985. It looked like love looked, Michael thought. Bright and hopeful and permanent. Back home, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. His daughter Lily had given it to him last Christmas, insisting he needed to join the modern world. He'd barely used it, only checking email now and then. But now he opened it with purpose. Where to start? He typed, "How to find someone from 1985" into Google. Thousands of results appeared. He clicked on one, then another, then another. Ancestry websites, genealogy forums, people search engines. It was overwhelming. He tried a different approach. Facebook. He'd created an account years ago because Lily insisted, but he'd never posted anything. Now he logged in and stared at the screen. How did this work? After an hour of clicking around, he figured out how to post a photo. He took a picture of the ring with his phone, uploaded it to his computer. That took another 20 minutes. And finally posted it to his page with a message. Found this ring on Boulder Creek Trail 30 years ago. Inscription says E+J forever, June 1985. Trying to find the owner. Please share. He had 17 friends on Facebook, mostly family. He doubted anything would come of it, but he kept trying. He found groups, local Colorado groups, hiking groups, lost and found groups. He requested to join them, waited for approval, then posted the same message and photo. Some groups ignored him. Others approved him, but his post got buried under hundreds of others. The days turned into weeks. Michael became obsessed. Every morning he'd wake up, check his Facebook messages, check his email, look for responses, nothing. Every afternoon he'd search new websites, try new approaches. He called the Boulder County Clerk's office. I'm looking for a marriage record from 1985, he told the woman who answered. The names are E and J, but that's all I have. First initials only. There was a pause. Sir, I'm sorry, but we need at least one full name. We have hundreds of marriages from 1985. Could you maybe look for ones in June? The ring says June 1985, another pause. Even narrowed to June, there were dozens of marriages. Without full names, I really can't help you. Michael thanked her and hung up, frustrated but not defeated. There had to be a way. Lily called that weekend. Dad, I saw your Facebook posts. You're really going for it with this ring thing, huh? Trying to, Michael said. Not having much luck. Want some help? I'm pretty good with social media. I could boost your post, share it to more groups, maybe even create a dedicated page for the search. Michael felt a warm rush of gratitude. Would you? Of course, Dad. Send me the best photo you have within a week. Lily had created a Facebook page called Help Find the Owner of a Lost Ring. She wrote up the whole story, how Michael had found it 30 years ago, how he'd kept it safe all this time, how he was determined to return it. She posted multiple photos from different angles, including close-ups of the inscription. She shared the page everywhere she could think of. Local news websites had comment sections she posted there. Reddit had communities for everything. She found the right ones. Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok. She made Michael film a short video telling the story. I feel ridiculous, Michael complained, sitting in front of his phone camera. You look great, Dad. Just talk naturally. Tell them why this matters to you. So he did. He told them about finding the ring on that Saturday morning in 1995, about the inscription, about wondering who E and J were, about keeping it safe for 30 years, about wanting to return something precious to people who lost it. Lily posted the video, and for the first time, something happened. Comments started coming in. People sharing their own lost ring stories. People saying how sweet it was. People sharing the page. Within a month, the page had 3,000 followers. Local news websites picked up the story. A Denver TV station reached out wanting to interview Michael. He said yes, terrified but determined. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Michael watched himself on TV, looking older than he remembered, talking about the ring. They showed close-ups of the inscription. The anchor called it a heartwarming quest and asked viewers to share if they knew anything. Michael's phone started ringing. His Facebook messages filled up. Most were people wishing him luck. Some were people claiming the ring was theirs but clearly lying. One man said his initials were E and J, but when Michael asked about the inscription, he got the date wrong. Hope rose and fell like a tide. Some days Michael was sure he'd never find them. Other days he was convinced it was just a matter of time. He learned to use ancestry websites, paying for subscriptions, searching through old records. He contacted hiking clubs in Colorado, asking if they had membership records from the 1990s. Most didn't. Those that did couldn't help without more information. 3 months into his retirement project, Michael had filed through hundreds of dead ends, but he wasn't discouraged. Not really. He'd waited 30 years already. He could wait a little longer. Danny visited one weekend and found his father surrounded by papers, laptop open, phone beside him. Dad, this is great and all, but are you sleeping? Eating? I'm fine, Michael said, waving him off. I'm on to something. There was a wedding announcement in the Boulder Daily Camera in June 1985, and I'm trying to get access to the archives. Danny sat down, looking worried. This is becoming an obsession. It's a project. You said I needed a project. I meant like golf or woodworking. Michael looked at his son, really looked at him. Danny had his mother's eyes, worried and caring. This matters to me, Michael said quietly. I made a promise. I know it sounds stupid after 30 years, but I made a promise to people I never met. I told them I'd find them. I need to keep that promise. Danny was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay, Dad, okay, just take care of yourself too, all right? After Danny left, Michael sat with the ring again. He'd been doing this a lot lately, just holding it, turning it over in his fingers. The gold was warm against his skin. The inscription caught the light. Somewhere out there, E and J existed, or they had existed. They'd been real people who loved each other enough to inscribe forever in gold. They'd walked on that trail, and one of them had lost something precious. They'd searched for it, mourned its loss, and eventually moved on with their lives. But Michael hadn't moved on. Couldn't move on. Not until he'd done everything possible to make this right. He opened his laptop again and typed in another search query. Then another. Then another. The sun set outside his window. The room grew dark. But Michael kept searching, the ring beside him forever waiting to go home. It was 2:47 in the morning when the message came through. Michael didn't know that yet. He was asleep in his bedroom, dreaming about something he wouldn't remember when he woke up. His phone was on the nightstand, plugged in and charging, the screen dark except for the small notification light that blinked once, then went quiet. The message sat there, waiting. 5 months of searching, hundreds of dead ends, thousands of shares and comments and false leads, and finally, in the middle of a Tuesday night, someone had seen the ring and recognized it. Michael woke at 5:30 like he always did. Retired or not, his body still thought he needed to be at a construction site by 6. He'd tried sleeping in, but it never worked. So he gave up fighting it and just went with his natural rhythm. He made coffee, strong and black, and sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. This had become his morning routine. Check emails. Check Facebook messages. Check the page Lily had created. Most mornings brought nothing but spam and well wishes. But he kept checking anyway. He opened Facebook Messenger, scrolling through the usual junk. Someone selling something, someone asking if he'd found the owner yet, someone sharing a similar story about their lost bracelet. Then he saw it, a message that made him stop scrolling, made his hand freeze on the mouse, made his heart start pounding in a way it hadn't in years. I think that might be my mother's ring. Michael read the words 3 times before they really sank in. His hands were shaking. He clicked on the message to read the rest. I think that might be my mother's ring. She lost it on a hike in Colorado in 1995. Her name was Ellen. My father was James. I saw your post in a vintage jewelry group and I couldn't believe it. That's my father's handwriting in the inscription. I'm sure of it. The message was from someone named Rebecca Martinez. Her profile picture showed a woman in her late 40s smiling, with dark hair and kind eyes. Michael clicked through to her page. She lived in Phoenix. She had 2 kids. She taught at an elementary school. And she thought this was her mother's ring. Michael's coffee sat forgotten, getting cold. He read the message again. Ellen and James, E and J, it could be them. After 30 years, it could actually be them. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What should he say? How do you respond to something like this? He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, he had no idea what to do. He started typing, deleted it, started again. Thank you for reaching out. Can you tell me more about when and where your mother lost the ring? I found it on the Boulder Creek Trail in Colorado. He hit send before he could overthink it. Then he sat back, staring at the screen, willing a response to appear. But nothing came. Of course nothing came. It was 6 in the morning in Colorado, which meant it was 5 in Phoenix. Rebecca was probably still asleep. Michael tried to go about his morning. He showered, got dressed, made breakfast. But he couldn't focus on anything. Every few minutes he'd check his phone. No response yet. At 8:30 his phone buzzed. Michael nearly dropped it, grabbing it off the counter. That's exactly where she lost it. Boulder Creek Trail. She and my dad were visiting Colorado doing some hiking. It was their 10th anniversary trip. She was devastated when she realized the ring was gone. They searched for days. Michael sat down heavily in a chair. This was real. This was actually happening. He typed back quickly. Can you tell me about the inscription? What does it say? The response came within minutes. It Blues J forever, June 1985. That was their wedding month and year. Michael felt tears prick at his eyes. 30 years. 30 years he'd been holding onto this ring, and finally he'd found them. But then something in Rebecca's message hit him. She'd said was, he typed carefully. Is your mother still in Colorado? I'd love to return the ring to her in person. The 3 dots appeared showing Rebecca was typing. They disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. When the message finally came through, Michael understood the hesitation. My mother passed away from cancer in 2010. My father died in 2018. His heart gave out, but I think it was really from grief. He never recovered from losing her. Michael sat in his kitchen, tears running down his face, staring at his phone. He'd found them. He'd actually found them, but he was 15 years too late to return the ring to Ellen. 8 years too late to return it to James. He wiped his eyes and typed back. I'm so sorry for your loss. Both of your losses. I've had this ring for 30 years. I kept it safe. I always hoped I'd be able to return it. You have no idea what this means to me, Rebecca wrote back. After my dad died, I was going through his things. He kept journals. In one entry from 1995, he wrote about the day Mom lost her ring. He said he told her it was okay, that they could get another one. But he saw her crying in the garden that night. He wrote, it's not about the gold. It's about the promise. Michael had to put his phone down. He stood up, walked to the window, tried to catch his breath. All these years he'd wondered about E and J. Wondered if they'd stayed together, if they'd been happy, if the ring had meant as much as he thought it did. Now he knew, and it meant everything. They exchanged numbers and agreed to talk on the phone that evening. Michael spent the rest of the day in a daze. He called Lily to tell her the news. She cried. He called Danny. He cried too. Dad, you did it, Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. After all this time, you actually did it. That evening, Michael's hand shook as he dialed Rebecca's number. She answered on the second ring. Michael? Her voice was warm, a little nervous. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for calling me back. They talked for 2 hours. Rebecca told him about her parents. How Ellen had been a teacher, just like Rebecca was now. How James had owned a small bookstore. How they'd been the kind of couple everyone admired. Still holding hands after 40 years together. She told him about the hike in 1995. They'd been celebrating their 10th anniversary, taking a trip to Colorado because Ellen had always wanted to see the mountains. They'd gone hiking one morning, and somewhere along the trail, Ellen's ring had slipped off. She'd lost weight that year and the ring was a little loose, but she never got it resized because she was planning to gain the weight back. She didn't even realize it was gone until they got back to the hotel, Rebecca said. They drove back to the trailhead and searched until dark. Came back the next day and searched again. She was heartbroken. I found it that next Saturday, Michael said. If they just come back one more day. Don't think like that, Rebecca said gently. You found it. You kept it safe. That's what matters. Michael told her about his 30-year search. About keeping the ring in the cedar box, moving it from house to house. About his retirement project, the Facebook page, the endless searching. Why? Rebecca asked. Why did you care so much about 2 people you'd never met? Michael thought about that. I don't know exactly. The inscription, I guess. Forever. That means something. Should mean something. I couldn't just let it disappear. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Rebecca spoke, her voice soft. My parents had that kind of forever. They really did. Even at the end, when Mom was sick and barely conscious, Dad would sit by her bed and hold her hand. After she died, he wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck. He said he wanted to keep it close to his heart since hers wasn't beating anymore. Michael wiped his eyes. Your father sounds like a good man. The best. They both were. I miss them every day. They made a plan. Michael would drive to Phoenix the following weekend. He'd bring the ring. They'd meet in person. After they hung up, Michael sat in his dark living room, the ring in his hand. He thought about Ellen and James, about love that lasted, about promises kept and promises lost and promises finally found again. He thought about Linda, about their marriage that ended, about how some forevers don't last, but that didn't make them less real when they happened. He thought about himself at 75, still trying to make good on a promise made 3 decades ago, still believing that some things mattered enough to never give up on. The ring felt warm in his palm. In a few days it would go home. Not to Ellen or James, but to their daughter, who carried their love forward, who would hold this piece of forever and remember. Michael placed the ring back in the cedar box, closed it gently, and smiled. 30 years was a long time to keep a promise, but some promises were worth the wait. The drive from Boulder to Phoenix took about 14 hours. Michael started early Friday morning, the cedar box carefully wrapped and placed in a padded bag on the passenger seat. He could have flown, probably should have flown at his age, but he wanted to drive, wanted the time to think, to process what was about to happen. The highway stretched out before him, empty and vast. Colorado gave way to New Mexico, which gave way to Arizona. The landscape changed from mountains to desert, green to brown, cool to hot. Michael had driven this route before years ago, when the kids were young and they'd taken a family vacation to the Grand Canyon. But that felt like a different lifetime, a different version of himself. He stopped for lunch at a diner in Albuquerque, sitting in a worn booth with cracked vinyl seats. The waitress was friendly, chatty, and Michael found himself telling her about the ring, about where he was going and why. "That's the sweetest thing I've heard in years," she said, refilling his coffee. "That family's lucky to have someone like you in the world." Michael hadn't thought of it that way. He'd never felt particularly special for keeping the ring. It just seemed like the right thing to do. But maybe that's what made it special. Doing the right thing even when it was hard. Even when it took 30 years. He arrived in Phoenix around 8 that evening. He'd booked a hotel near where Rebecca lived, something simple and clean. He checked in, took a shower, and tried to sleep. But his mind wouldn't settle. Tomorrow he'd meet Rebecca. Tomorrow he'd finally return the ring. After 3 decades, the promise would be kept. He kept reaching for his phone, wanting to check that the ring was still there, still safe. But of course it was. He'd checked a dozen times during the drive. It wasn't going anywhere. Saturday morning came with Arizona sunshine pouring through the hotel curtains. Michael got up, got dressed in his nicest shirt and pants, and carefully placed the cedar box in a small velvet bag that Lily had sent him for the occasion. She'd insisted he needed to make the moment special. They'd agreed to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix at 10 o'clock. Michael arrived 15 minutes early and sat at an outside table, the velvet bag in his lap. The morning was already warm, the dry heat of the desert settling over everything. At exactly 10, a woman walked up to his table. She was shorter than he expected, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that were red like she'd been crying. Behind her were 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, and a man Michael assumed was her husband. "Michael?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. He stood up, suddenly emotional himself. "Rebecca, it's good to finally meet you." She hugged him, surprising them both. When she pulled back, tears were streaming down her face. "I can't believe this is real. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up." They sat down, Rebecca's family pulling up chairs. She introduced her husband, Paul, and her kids, Alex and Sophie. Everyone looked nervous, excited, overwhelmed. "I brought photos," Rebecca said, pulling out her phone. "I wanted you to see them. My parents." She showed him picture after picture. Ellen and James on their wedding day in 1985, young and radiant. Ellen in a simple white dress, James in a suit, both of them looking at each other like nothing else existed. Pictures from throughout their marriage, anniversaries, holidays, random moments. The last picture was from 2009. Both of them older, Ellen thin and frail from cancer, but James's arm around her, both of them smiling. "They looked happy," Michael said softly. "They were," Rebecca said, "right up until the end. Mom used to say that losing the ring broke her heart a little, but having Dad made it whole again. She never wore another wedding band, though. Said it wouldn't feel right." Michael reached into the velvet bag and pulled out the cedar box. His hands were shaking. He opened it slowly, and there was the ring gleaming in the Arizona sun. Rebecca gasped. She reached out, then hesitated like she was afraid to touch it. "It's okay," Michael said gently. "It's yours now. It's finally going home." She picked it up carefully, holding it between her thumb and forefinger. She read the inscription, her lips moving silently. "Ypres J forever. June 1985, tears fell onto the table. That's my dad's handwriting. He had the jeweler engrave it exactly as he wrote it." She slipped the ring onto her right hand. It fit perfectly. "Mom and I had the same ring size," she said, staring at it. "I didn't know that until after she died and I tried on her other jewelry. But we did. The exact same size." Her kids leaned in to look, Sophie touching the ring gently. "Grandma wore this?" She did, Rebecca said. Every day for 10 years until she lost it. And now it's back. Paul, Rebecca's husband, spoke for the first time. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. What you did, keeping this safe for 30 years, searching for the owners, that's extraordinary. Michael shook his head. I'm just glad I could finally return it. I'm sorry I couldn't give it back to your parents, Rebecca. I wish I'd found you sooner. Don't be sorry, Rebecca said firmly. You found us exactly when you were supposed to. I've been thinking about this a lot since we talked. If you'd found us 10 years ago, Dad was still grieving. The ring might have made that worse, reminding him of what he'd lost. 5 years ago, I was going through a divorce, barely holding it together. I don't think I would have appreciated this the way I do now. She touched the ring, turning it on her finger. Right now, today, I needed this. I needed to know that their love was real, was permanent, is still here somehow. My kids need to see it too. Need to understand that forever isn't just a word people say. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. They talked for 2 hours. Rebecca told stories about her parents. The bookstore James owned, how Ellen would come have lunch with him every day, how they'd dance in the kitchen to old records, how when Ellen got sick, James learned to cook her favorite meals even though he'd never cooked a day in his life before that. Michael told them about his life too, about finding the ring that Saturday morning, about his own marriage that ended, about his kids and grandkids, about how keeping the ring safe had become something important to him, a promise he couldn't break. You kept them alive, Rebecca said. In a way, you kept their love alive by protecting this symbol of it. That means more than I can express. Before they parted, Rebecca insisted on taking pictures. Michael with the family. Michael with Rebecca. Close-ups of the ring now on Rebecca's hand. She said she wanted to remember everything about this day. I'm going to share this story, she said, on the Facebook page Lily created. People need to know how it ended. People need to know that sometimes promises do get kept. As Michael got ready to leave, Sophie, Rebecca's daughter, spoke up. She'd been quiet most of the morning, just watching. Mr. Chen, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you care so much? I mean, you didn't know my grandparents. You could have just sold the ring or thrown it away. Why did you spend 30 years looking for people you never met? Michael thought about that. He'd been asked that question before, but never by someone so young, someone who genuinely seemed to want to understand. Because some things are bigger than us, he said finally. That ring represented a promise, a commitment, love. And I thought that mattered, that it was worth protecting. Your grandparents made a promise to each other, and even though I never knew them, I wanted to honor that promise. Does that make sense? Sophie nodded. Yeah, it does. I think it's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Rebecca walked Michael to his truck. She was still wearing the ring, kept looking down at it like she couldn't quite believe it was there. Thank you, she said one more time, for everything, for keeping it safe, for never giving up, for caring about 2 strangers. They weren't strangers, Michael said. Not really. I've been carrying them with me for 30 years. I feel like I know them in a way. I think they know you too, Rebecca said softly. Wherever they are, I think they're grateful. The drive back to Colorado felt different. Lighter somehow. The cedar box was empty now, sitting on the passenger seat. Michael had offered it to Rebecca, but she'd insisted he keep it. It's part of the story, she'd said. The box that kept the ring safe. You should have it. Michael drove through the desert as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He thought about Ellen and James, about the 10 years they'd had with the ring and all the years after without it, about how Rebecca now wore her mother's ring, carrying forward a love story that had started 40 years ago in a simple inscription. He thought about promises, the ones we keep and the ones we break, the ones that define us and the ones we forget. He'd kept this promise, 30 years late, but he'd kept it. When Michael got home late Sunday night, exhausted but content, he found a message from Lily. Dad, Rebecca posted on the Facebook page. You need to see it. He opened Facebook and found Rebecca's post. It was long, detailed, telling the whole story. The ring, the search, the meeting. There were pictures of her wearing the ring, pictures of her parents, pictures of Michael. The post had been up for 3 hours and already had 2,000 comments. People crying. People sharing their own stories. People saying how beautiful it was. How it restored their faith in humanity. Michael read through some of the comments, tears in his eyes. This is why we don't give up on people. A 30-year promise kept, incredible. That ring was blessed to have Michael Chen find it. He closed his laptop and sat in his quiet condo. The cedar box was on the table, empty but somehow still meaningful. He thought about Danny telling him he needed a project, about Lily helping him search, about all the dead ends and false leads and moments when he almost gave up. He thought about Ellen and James, two people he'd never met but had been connected to for 3 decades. About forever inscribed in gold, about promises that outlast us. At 75 years old, Michael Chen had done a lot in his life. Built businesses, raised kids, loved and lost, but this felt like the most important thing he'd ever done. Not because it was grand or impressive, but because it was right. Simple, honest, and right. The ring was home. The promise was kept. And somewhere, somehow, he liked to think Ellen and James knew that their forever had come full circle, held safe by a stranger who believed that some things, some promises, were worth any amount of time to protect. Michael went to bed that night with a full heart. Tomorrow would bring new days, new challenges, new moments, but tonight he'd rest in the knowledge that he'd done what he set out to do 30 years ago on a hiking trail in Colorado. He'd kept the promise. He'd brought forever home.